Hello, I've gathered you all here in the drawing room with a special guest to take me to their happy times and places. This is a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast. My guest chooses a story and their favourite things about it, and I have to guess what those favourite things might be and point the finger at them.
Thank you, Toby, for asking me to come and speak to you about my favourite things regarding the Ark. My name's Mark Aldridge and I'm Associate Professor of Screen Histories at Solent University in Southampton, and obviously a big Doctor Who fan, as most people who love screen histories tend to be. When you approached me and said, would I like to do it? And you said, I'll send you a list, but it's a bit depleted. And my response to you was, well, I love all of Doctor Who, so it doesn't really matter. So I thought, so long as Meglos isn't there, because that's a stinker, the rest of it's really rather good. So when I went through it, I thought, oh God, there's loads of Hartnells that people haven't picked. I love a bit of Hartnell. So that's why I've chosen the Ark, because I think it's oddly underrated, and I don't really know why it's not thought of more, really, because it's a really rattling good story, but it also all survives, which you can't always take for granted in this era of Doctor Who. Massively ambitious, but I'll come back to that, I think, when I tell you my favourite things about each episode, and then an overall favourite thing as well.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Toby Haydock and I was in a William Hartnell mood. So the next happy times and places will be located somewhere we have to enter 2 by 2. So I shall hold the hand of my special guest, Mark Aldridge, as we enter the Ark. Mark has downplayed himself a little bit. He's also an expert on Agatha Christie and has books out and all sorts. And also he was instrumental in facilitating that Doctor Who's Round interview I did with Russell T. Davis that I know a lot of people have listened to. So Mark is a good egg, but also comes with fine knowledge and a big old brain. And I'm delighted he's chosen the Ark. I am also of the opinion that the Ark is shockingly underrated. I'm a big fan of season 3 anyway. I think John Wiles and Donald Tosh have a really interesting cerebral approach to Doctor Who that doesn't always quite work, but they certainly flex the show's format, and they're ambitious with it. And if they'd had a chance to do more than mostly the Daleks master plan, which they didn't want to do anyway, I think we would have a really strange and beguiling period of the show that lasts longer than the smattering of stories that we get from them. I also remember that the Ark was my introduction to the Ark was through my introduction to most Doctor Who through Doctor Who A Celebration, and they talk about the massacre being almost 2 stories for the price of one, because William Hartnell does a speech at the end, and then Jeremy Bentham writes up the Ark by saying, well, if the massacre was nearly 2 stories for the price of one, the Ark most definitely is, and of course it's because the Ark has this. So it's sort of two-parters fused together with an arc. It's an arc with an arc. Ha ha ha. But no repetition of characters apart from the monoids. So it's an odd fish. I first got it as a bootleg video, and it was one of the few bootlegs that was in really good quality, so it looked almost to my untrained eye like broadcast quality. So it was a much easier watch than some, but I was shocked at how well directed it was. That's the thing that really bursts out to me with the Ark. And I think if it was a more famous headline director, we might talk about how it looks a bit more. I think it's also slightly kiboshed. Peter Purvis, for some reason, has got it into his head that the Ark isn't very good. But when I've spoken to him about it, on camera, I've said, oh yeah, but it's a really ambitious and interesting script. And so then he goes, yeah, but it looks terrible. And the director was sacked. Well, the director was sacked, but there was a bit of internal BBC politics there. He was sacked from his BBC staff position. He wasn't sacked because his work on the Ark was poor, and I would argue it's some of the best direction of the 1960s that Michael Imeson bestows upon this particular story. And I think some of the visuals in terms of, we'll talk about the Earth people's costumes, etc., but the visuals in terms of what the camera is doing and the ambition of the special effects, I think is pretty much second to none in the Hartnell era. as a sort of consistent thing. Camfield is, of course, an excellent director, and he does some brilliant things with Masterplan. But I think what Imeson does here is consistently ambitious in terms of how he wants the show to look and how he can make each shot work, or work even better than it might do on paper. And the story is interesting and throws up some things about colonialism and how we treat people and all of that. But I think it's easy to give that a simplistic reading too, because obviously all of this stuff has to fit within the format of Doctor Who as well. So I think there's a lot going on with the arc. So I hope we will have plenty to talk about. And let us fire up episode 1 of the arc, which is brilliantly called, what a title, The Steel Sky. And I'm going to press play. I'm watching it on iPlayer. All Doctor Who, most Doctor Who is available on BBC iPlayer, so do seek it out there, as well as then when they come out on Blu-ray, buying the range. But I suspect season 3 will be a long way off because we don't have it all, and it's not all animated either. So this one will be on physical media sometime in the future, I suspect. Anyway, let us all climb aboard the Ark in 3, 2, 1. So I got this on a bootleg, and I had it a beautiful copy, courtesy of my supplier, Colin. But unfortunately, I had a video machine that had a habit of chewing things up. So this beautiful, unblemished episode of the Ark was slightly damaged when I went to play it once, and I had to put it out. So actually, this opening shot of the bird, after a while, had a line that went through it, and it jumped slightly because the tape had been chewed, which was a shame, because of all the episodes, it had to be the one that was rather beautiful. Although I do think this opening shot is quite funny, because we've got the monitor lizard there, and that looks rather exciting and beautiful, and it's lovely. And then they chuck a bird onto it, don't they? I mean, that's isn't it? That's literally, let's just throw the bird. But this is already an interesting start, because you don't see animals of that kind that aren't stock footage really in Doctor Who, or indeed in a lot of television. I remember being slightly, this opening shot of the monoid, it does kind of make it obvious that the eye is in a mouth, that it does look like it's got lips, which other shots and other renditions of the monoid do not. So I think that opening shot slightly gives the game away, which is a bit of a shame, because I think largely the monoid single eye thing is rather artfully done. I don't mind the hair. I actually think the monoids are quite a good design. I like that. I think it looks convincingly reptilian. The sort of web between the legs obviously does compromises their gait somewhat, but I am not anti what the monoids look like. I think for 60s monsters they're pretty good, but that shot doesn't really help them brilliantly. And here we have Jackie Lane as Dodo in a costume that I adore. I love this costume. I think it's great fun. But this was my first sighting of Dodo, and I was all well ready to like Dodo, because nobody really talked about her much, and she wasn't in it that long, and you had to really know your Doctor Who stuff if you knew who Dodo was. And I have to say, all due respect to Jackie Lane, she's dreadful in this scene. And she was lovely, Jackie, and I think had a tricky time. But look at I mean, Barry Newbury's set here is absolutely fantastic. You really, this really does sell jungle. But and we have I have a big bee in my bonnet about Doctor Who, original Doctor Who fans who wrote Jackie Lane up as doing a Cockney accent in Doctor Who. She never does a Cockney accent in Doctor Who. She does Mancunian at the end of the massacre. You can hear it. It's really odd. Doctor Who fans who seem to know a lot about a lot. A lot of Doctor Who fans only know about Doctor Who and don't know about anything else. But there are some Doctor Who fans who seem to know a lot about a lot, but they have a blind spot with one, ranks in the army. So even professional Doctor Who fans who become writers have never quite... And you can pick this up from Doctor Who, that you don't go from being a corporal or a sergeant to being a colonel. You are either... you go in as an officer, or you are, the the non-commissioned officer, the NCOs, like the sergeants and the corporals, etc. That is not that is a model, isn't it? A couple of those are models, but I think they've pulled it off so well with establishing the monsters and the mixture of filmed shots and studio that I think we really buy this opening. They've really gone to town on establishing the environment, which I think is an effective way to make this story feel like it's taking place in a particular occasion. I like the way that we first happen upon the Doctor and he's sort of lurking, and I know Hartnell's almost sort of waiting for his cue there, but it's like he's sort of lurking and keeping an eye and making sure that Dodo's not up to no good, and it makes him sort of almost spectral, which I don't think is harmful when it comes to the Doctor and what he's all about. But yes, Jackie is not Cockney, never has been Cockney. In fact, I happened upon an article in a magazine that had belonged to Jackie, and it said, Jackie Lane played Dodo in Doctor Who, the Cockney, blah, 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 and she's crossed it out and put Northern or Mancunian every time. And this was quite early on. This was one of the few interviews that she'd done. Now, I found out a fact about this. I broke this. It was this man here, David Greenough. He'd also been in The Mythmakers. He's a bodybuilder and model. He's not really an actor, but he'd got his equity card, I think, and was doing supporting work on television. I just happened to mention when I was gigging with the very well-known comedian Russell Kane. I think I mentioned on stage as a joke that I knew the name of every actor that's been in Doctor Who or something. And he said, "Oh, my dad was in Doctor Who. He got shrunk or something." And I said, "Oh, was he called David Greenough?" And he went, "How did you know that?" Blah, blah, blah. And he was amazed, and we talked about it, and he was thrilled. And in fact, I bought him and sent him the DVD of the Ark, and I then told Doctor Who magazine, so we broke it as a kind of story. In fact, Chortle, the comedy website, also broke it as a story, but couldn't help but be snide and say, and Russell Kane, who's always said he's from a sort of is always presented his dad as this sort of bloke who was sort of again his artsy son, implying that Russell had somehow lied and that his dad was in the theatrical profession. Well, no, I think his dad still was and a big sort of bodybuilder, muscular bound type, but that doesn't mean he didn't earn a few quid by doing extra work. It's not quite the same as being a la-di-da comedian. Anyway, quite why they couldn't have just broken the story and said, "Here's a nice story that we found out," but have some implied snark. There's a lot of implied snark in journalism these days, in comedy writing and sci-fi writing, and I dislike it. He said snarkily. And also, mid-snark about Doctor Who. As I say, Doctor Who, professional Doctor Who fans who seem to, the ones who've gone on to be very good writers, but seem to have a blind spot when it comes to accents, how accents work and what they are, and ranks in the army. But anyway, for the avoidance of any doubt, Jackie Lane has a Mancunian accent. She's from here. She's from round the corner. In fact, her sister lived round the corner from where I live now, which is why I saw Jackie Lane on a train. And I've told that story before. So that is the end of David Greenough, Russell Kane Sr. But yeah, he's Russell Kane's dad. And that is a little bit of Doctor Who history that I found out rather gloriously through just happening to say a thing in the presence of the person who could furnish me with that information. And life is full of such coincidences, and they hearten me and make me excited. And I seem to have a particular propensity for Doctor Who related ones. That's Inigo Jackson as Zentos. I'm sure we will talk about him. But first we've got Monica the elephant, who last I checked I think is still alive, because elephants live for a very long time, you see. And she's only a baby elephant here. And Michael Imeson, the director, tells a great story of how he'd had to, house her overnight. Hey, look at him then. It's not good. And the bit where she says, because she's got a bit earlier, doesn't she? Where she goes, "If you go down that path there, you can find the something in the T-bar." And T-bar is it's her attempt at RP, I think, and path, of course, is a residual of her Northern Mancunian thing. So it's a curious hybrid on occasion before she settles fairly quickly into this sort of rather jolly, smiley RP that she does, that I think slightly hampers her performance, and I think was certainly not the reason that she was hired. I think she was hired to give a bit of sort of Rita Tushingham, Taste of Honey, genuine Northern urchin vibe to it, which would have mixed up the show a little bit, because it's not often you don't have RP in major protagonists in the 60s television that isn't about having having terrible time in a ginnel. That's a great crane shot. Look, so I think it would have mixed up Doctor Who quite nicely, and it would have been fun for Jackie as well, who I think. I like Dodo much more now, and those will recall the Happy Times and Places of the Gunfighters, where that was a particularly good story for her. But I think I view Dodo through the lens of, oh no, she's better than I used to think, because I hated her when I first discovered her. And went, oh God, she's terrible, and I don't think it's the best performance. I can see why Dodo didn't last, which is a shame. Because she's got the energy, and I think she's very likable, and she's got a great look about her. It's a very 60s look, that sort of elfin, urchin, short-haired thing. She could be bouncy and fun, and I think she has a nice rapport with Hartnell, actually. But a lot of that, a lot of the delivery is kind of play schooly type, which is a shame. And I have to say, when I first saw this, was a real shock, footling about in my wardrobe. But yes, kudos to Barry Newbury for his set, but kudos too to Michael Imeson for the way he shoots it, but also the mixture of film shots and studio shots. Really, I think really sells this, and they're very well entwined, if you like. I mean, I would struggle with the line, I think I'm beginning to enjoy this space travel, or whatever it is. And Purvis is always good value, and sort of drives this really. And I like. I see that's ambitious. Have the monoid, the lurking monoid, walk towards the camera, and then start from the back of a monoid to herald this scene, and then pan out so we get as much of the set as we can see. Doctor Who, which is often quite cramped and quite small. This sign language, by the way. I remember I interviewed. Well, I didn't. I mean, I spoke to Paul Greenhalgh on the phone. We'll talk about him in episode 2, because that's the one that he's in. More connections with the Ark. So here we have. I mean, I think where the show slightly falls down, in that Imeson has spent his money on the sets. I would be interested to see the breakdowns, actually, because I wonder how much cheaper these actors are than your usual Doctor Who cast list, because there's usually a couple of actors that cost over £100 an episode who are your sort of major guest stars, whereas I think because nobody's going to last more than 2, and because he spent a lot of money on sets and monsters and everything else, it's not a strong cast, I would say. I do rather like Eric Elliott with his we are, he's sort of smelly, he's like a sort of very happy bag push, but with a terrible lisp. He'd been an extra. You can spot him in the scenes in Quatermass and the Pit in episode 1, where Quatermass appeals to the civil servants to abandon the nuclear deterrent that they're setting up in space. I know, it was very forward thinking. So Eric Elliott, and he pops up in an early episode of the Avengers as well. Well, he's credited in that though, but he plays a butler or something. But he's not somebody that, I mean, he's the sort of biggest role in this episode, really. And it also, for an actor who has to say microcell slides, he's got a lot of S's that his lisp simply cannot cope with. And I remember there was a bit of a coincidence. My mum was trying to raise money for the church roof down the road from us in the 80s, and had a donation from a man called Eric Elliott, and I harboured for a moment that it might be him, because he would have been really old if he was still alive in the 80s, but I kind of hoped, but it wasn't. But yes, it wasn't the same guy. But yes, the cast is not strong, although it is littered with interesting names. But I think that's there's no real. Usually with a Doctor Who, you could say, oh, and there's this fantastic performance in it that helps to sell it. Instead, Imeson's decided to sell it with really interesting visuals, and really strong design, and I think as a result this looks $1 million in Doctor Who. He's also saved on the music a little bit, I suspect, because it's something that Tristram Carey has already recorded, so I suspect that was a cheaper way of doing it. and actually, I think the music fits this, even though it's the music for the Daleks. I think it works. I think it works handily in this. Is it? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I just suddenly had a thought of going, or is it just a little bit like it? No, they have reused Tristram Carey's Daleks music in order to save a bit of money. I like the way they have seeded Dodo's sneeze into this, and I think this is a really good idea. And actually, I really like the way she says "my nose is running," and that is quite sort of northern and what we would have, because of course Maureen O'Brien's the same, isn't she? She's a Liverpudlian, but has to do RP. But it's interesting, isn't it, how the template is? They're all a sort of similar physical type, sort of small and bouncy and cute, and that's the template until they decide to mix it up with Polly next. Peter Purvis has got his shirt open. Look at that, action hero Purvis. So the steel sky. So that's a slide, isn't it? But that's a really nice idea. You're in this jungle. You're in this fascinating jungle, and look at that. You don't see. I think that's brilliant, because I've seen this so many times before. And until attention is drawn to those monoids, you don't see them, and then they seem to come out of the jungle. I think it's absolutely terrific. I think it's really well directed. And look at this moving camera that you've got going over the stenographer monoid, the monographer. But it's not just the cast, it's the fact that the cast are wearing those things that my nan used to have a shop, and I'm sure shops and butcher shops and everything had those doors that weren't doors. It was a doorway that had those strips hanging. I don't know why you didn't have a door. Why? What were they for? He's very serious when he does his sign language there. But they're wearing those, shop back partitions over a pair of pants, which I think is a look I would have reconsidered had I been tried. Why is it that they decide that in the future people will try to be a bit nude? But the rest of it, and this idea that we're approaching the destruction of Earth, that's big, I think. It's not something you throw in glibly, and it feels like Doctor Who is suddenly getting a sort of bit grown up and universal. And you don't get the destruction of Earth. I mean, it's mooted all of the time, but the idea that it might actually happen, and I think it's quite bold of a story to say, well, we're going to destroy the Earth in episode 1. Where should we go from here? I think is really amazing and ambitious. And also look at the number of extras that this had. There were kids playing. I should interview some of them. That's Roy Spencer, who's in Fury from the Deep, who has a terrible pudding bowl haircut in this. They were quite the fashion one day. I don't think they've ever quite worked. And yeah, Inigo Jackson here as Zentos, who I think is terrible, which is odd because he played King Lear at the Liverpool Everyman. I think he had quite a good stage career. I think his real name was Anthony Michael Jackson or Michael Anthony Jackson. But either way, there's an actor called Anthony Jackson, Fred Mumford in, Fred, in one of the original Rent-A-Ghost people. He was also hired to be the voice of Azal, but didn't do it in the end, because why would you need somebody to do it when you've got Stephen Thorne? And of course, Michael Jackson is quite a well-known entertainer. But there's lots of extras here, and one of those things I didn't find out until his obituary was in The Guardian was that amongst these extras populating the Ark is Bill Hunter. Went on to be a hugely successful film actor, the Australian actor Bill Hunter. He's the driver in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, but he's in all the big Australian films, and he had a phenomenal career. But I didn't realise he'd done supporting artist work while he was visiting the UK, and that included being in Doctor Who. So he's a genuine film star who can make a claim for being in Doctor Who. Whereas Kate Newman here as Mellium, we've never quite found, and in fact there's some confusion whether she might be Kay Dautrice, who's the mother, one of the Dautrice family, Roy Dautrice, Michelle Dautrice, all of them. I think we've come to the conclusion that she's not, but she was Kate Newman, then she disappeared a bit, and then she's in Spotlight in the 80s once as Catherine Newman, but we've never quite traced her or worked out exactly who she is, who plays Mellium here. Rather annoyingly, this actually, when we did because I did the commentary for the Ark, I was very late for it. I missed my train, but everyone was very nice. The Ark is one of the DVDs I'm on that frustrates me because we have Michael Imerson and Peter Purvis on the commentary, and they're also the only two people on the documentary. And at that point, loads of the cast were still around. I mean, Roy Spencer is still around as I record this. But Ian Frost, who plays Baku, Brian Wright, he's still around as well. Eileen Helsby is still about, but Terence Baylor, Richard Beale, who are no longer with us, a couple of the Monoids. We could have filled a documentary with people that weren't the same two people on the commentary. So that's one that niggles me slightly. Anyway, I didn't want to say too much because I was late. And they tried to get. I know they tried to get Jackie for the commentary, and she'd originally agreed, and then decided not to do it late in the day. I've talked about Jackie and my feelings about why she might not have wanted to take part, but she did at least make positive noises before backing out. There's everything about. I think Eric Elliott has a very, very sweet energy. He's really benign. He's obviously a lovely commander, but everything from the way he walks to the sort of this permanent smile he's got on his face, I think conspires against making his performance anything other than sort of children's TV a little bit. This is a great conceit, as we will find out when we get the cliffhanger later. But these are scenery dock cars, aren't they? They're. But again, it's Imerson going, well, let's have the Monoids drive around. You don't see aliens driving around inside in Doctor Who, and I just think, she had a little bit of a stumble there. But I mean, I wouldn't have been wild as an actor if they'd said, right, you're all going to be wearing swimming trunks and bikinis with not much else. I think it would be a fairly grim procedure. So here we get the beginning of the plot, which is, and look, that set, obviously that's a painted backdrop showing the capsules and everything, but it this is not unlike stuff you would have seen in grown-up shows like Out of the Unknown. I recall some of the visuals in the sci-fi episodes of those not being dissimilar, so we're not doing too badly. There's a slight sort of. There's a few actors like that who have a slight rosy sort of thing. He's got a slight David Miliband sort of nasal thing going on there in Inigo Jackson, which is not a great sound for an actor. You want your actors to be sort of resonant and lungy, don't you? But his sort of commander too has a strange flavour. He's sort of all talking through his head, nobody sounds like they've been to the RSC. Now, that I know is problematic in and of itself, and I know some people find it hilarious that everyone in space talks like they've been doing a season at the National Theatre. But I just think that sort of commanding vocal presence helps to ground what can sometimes be slightly flappy scenery or unimpressive costuming or something. If you have the heft of great British actors at your disposal, I think it just gives it the ballast that sometimes the visuals and sometimes the dialogue lacks. You want somebody that you're in absolute confidence with as a performer. But look how brilliantly this is framed here. He's very cleverly put Inigo Jackson there between, and Inigo Jackson's quite a mix as well. Inigo is a very European Mediterranean name that sounds a bit and then Jackson, it's like being called Juan Smith, but that's an awkward bit of staging there. He has to say take them and then make his way all the way around in order to give his speech, which I have to say I don't think he does very well at all. Bless him. They'll be made to suffer for the crimes they have committed. I am shocked he played King Lear and was quite an admired stage actor in terms of, as I say, it wasn't doing the big. Well, the Liverpool was a pretty impressive place to be performing, but he's he may well die, doesn't he? He says rather. Now he does this line different next week, which is worth a look. He's directed slightly differently, but look at that. Oh no, the Earth doesn't die at the end of this episode. The Earth dies halfway through the story. At the end of next episode, we just have a close up of the Earth on its way out. But I actually think that's a really good cliffhanger, because there's a lot of import in those lines. It's not just that the time travelers are in trouble, which they are, but they've brought the trouble with them, which I think is a fabulous idea. But also, in bringing the trouble with them, they might have actually condemned the human race to death and make the endeavour that we're watching over and pointless. And this is an attempt to do, I'm not going to say grown up, but it is a bit sort of more grown up in terms of atmosphere and intent, even though that grown upness, if you can say such a thing, is slightly diluted by the fact that everyone's got flip flops on and is sort of flip flopping about benignly until Zentos gets cross. But it's an attempt to do something cerebral. I think it's an attempt to see what you can do with the format of Doctor Who, and I think that sometimes you can do that a little bit too much. But actually here, I think it's just saying, so travels in time, and they're coming from outside in. I think it's just, instead of going, what can the aliens be like this week, but we've also got a bit of that as well. I think Paul Erickson and Leslie Scott, we will get into that when I get to a bit where I haven't got much to say about, because I have spent much time searching for Leslie Scott. Sounds like a documentary I might make, but honestly, it would take about 3 minutes looking for Leslie, unless I have any breakthroughs beyond what I've got, which is unlikely. I did have what I thought was a photo for ages, but then I worked it out that was somebody different, and that because for ages I thought Leslie... For those of you that don't know, I sometimes assume too much knowledge. It was always written up as Paul Erickson and Leslie Scott, husband and wife team, who wrote the Ark. But Erickson later said at conventions, that was something I regret. It was something I was sort of persuaded to do, and all the copyright is assigned to just Paul Erickson. So I think we're satisfied that Paul Erickson wrote it, but the Leslie Scott credit was added to appease or to please or to help someone. Now, Paul's first wife, and Paul wasn't called Paul. Paul's real name was Frederick Kerr. Can't remember off the top of my head. I've got all this written down. I write stuff down now so I don't have to remember it in my head. It's, because then I can gen up should I be about to do something specific, like, say, a half-hour commentary on an episode of Doctor Who, so I should have done that. But I've got 4 episodes, so we'll maybe talk about Paul Erickson. But anyway, I did get a picture of Paul's first wife, Gemma Vitale, and I found out loads about her and was convinced she was Leslie Scott, and then discovered she probably... So it's really difficult because there's no divorce, it seems, from Paul and Gemma, or no record of it. And they are living together until the early 60s. And then later he marries someone called Miranda Baker in about 1980. In the 80s, I think. It's late, about 1986. And I can find her living with him as well. And again, under not his Paul Erickson name, under his other name. But there's one instance that I found in the census of Paul and Leslie Erickson living together. And then I found, I think, who Leslie might be, who was a model or an actress at around that time. So I found Leslie flickers for a couple, 2 or 3 years, and then vanishes. And there's no, I don't think there's any marriage records with Leslie and Paul, or there's, anyway, there's certainly no divorce. So yeah, so it's tricky and hard and tantalizing, but without asking Paul, who we can't because he's long dead. It's a tricky one. So I've looked and looked and looked. That's what it should be called for, looking and looking and looking and looking for Leslie. But she might still be out there. But what would she, what would she tell us if it was all, no, I didn't write it, or no, I can't even remember because it's not that important to me. Well, it was important enough to get your name on Doctor Who, Leslie. Oh, but anyway, we're at the point now where it's a surprise if people are still alive. Although the Ark has done very well. The Ark had always done very well. In fact, it always had quite a good survival rate cast-wise, which is why we could have populated the DVD a lot more. But anyway, Eileen. Well, we'll talk about Eileen Helsby later because she's not in it till the parts 3 and 4. So let us crack on with favourite things. Favourite things. Now, I love Michael Imerson's direction. I mean, that is going to be a biggie. In fact, I might. I'd love to save that for my bonus thing at the end because it is all encompassing. But if I don't invoke it and Mark does, I will lose that as a potential point. But unless he's thinking the same way that I'm thinking, I don't know. I love that jungle set. I love the title, The Steel Sky. It's really thoughtful and beguiling and, I think sums up this story's really interesting approach to storytelling. I love the idea of the travellers bringing the danger with them. I love the idea that something that we take for granted, the common cold, which has been wiped out so far ahead in the future, is now dangerous, inimical to the human race. I love the fact that Erickson's decided to take us further forward in the future than we've ever been before. I love this idea of 57 segments of time, especially as it's poor old Eric Elliott who has to say 57 segments. But he can't even say time properly either. And that, all the adventures we've heard of so far only took place in the first segment of time, which means that, it's I like anything that makes us go, all our small little petty concerns are dwarfed by the infinite majesty of the universe and indeed the huge passage of time betwixt the beginning and everything and the end of everything. I think it helps us to know our place and places the Doctor Who's adventures in a really interesting context. And I don't think there's really been anything like that in the show up till this point. The show has been clever and ambitious and has used metaphor and has been inspired by real events or thoughtful science fiction ideas. But I think the scope of this and the ambition of this in terms of what Paul Ericsson's trying to do with the story and then Michael Imeson, meets it with his visuals is brilliant. So I mean, I'm spoiled for a story that nobody really talks about, and I sadly feel nobody really likes that much. I think this is absolutely top-notch Doctor Who. I think, the way the humans look, and the fact that none of them are giving amazing performances, is blocks us from it slightly because that's often our in. But I think the monoids look great. I think the strange shambling gait that is dictated by the fact that they've decided to fuse their legs together with the sort of web between them could be taken as ridiculous if you choose so to do, but I also think, well, it's nice to have something that isn't a man with two legs. I think they've at least tried to do something slightly different. I think that opening shot with the eye, obviously, in the mouth isn't great, but the rest of the time, I think that carries itself off pretty well. I don't mind the haircuts. I think it breaks up the reptilian look. I like the monoids. Okay, I like the monoids. I was brought up on Doctor Who. To me, the monoids don't look ridiculous at all. But maybe to some people they do. But I've never seen that. And so I think this is a really certainly a strong episode 1. I think there's so much in it. I like the rapport between the TARDIS crew and the fact that they're having to get Dodo used to this space travel or whatever it is. All the stuff in the jungle, the way that the film and the studio stuff is combined. Barry Newbury's design is great. The fact that Michael Imeson pulls the camera right back to show the sets for their sheer size. It feels like we're in an epic big spaceship on the way to something major, and it's somewhere that has the resources to hold the whole human race. And you've got, a throwaway scene. It's lovely in the book, the way that the guy who gets shrunk at the beginning, Russell Kane's dad, gets brought back at the end. It's a shame that they couldn't do that. In fact, the book is really, really good, by the way. If you've never read the book, just he adds lots of little tweaks and moments that just tie it all up slightly better than this does, and the characters, and particularly the characters of the monoids, are a bit better defined, and that's slightly frustrating. It is a bit like sometimes watching a Malcolm Hulk, where you go, oh, they did that so much better in the book. But so what do I think I have to choose Michael Imeson, because I think he will be chosen at some point, and to me he is the headline of this story. He looks very like Salman Rushdie. I think he even did some Salman Rushdie looky-likey stuff. That might be an urban myth, but I don't think so. He's certainly head of the Humanist Society, Michael, because I mentioned that to Terence Baylor, who's in episode 3, who said that he wanted a humanist funeral. But yeah, Michael is a very, very interesting guy. He went on to be story editor of Out of the Unknown and a literary agent of some distinction. But I think he's a brilliant director. He's obviously a very erudite and able man, and I think if he'd directed more Doctor Who's, the 60s would have been a much more interesting place to hang about visually in some regards. And I think his approach to special effects is really committed too. So I have to choose Michael Imeson, because I think he's not talked about enough. I think he's a stunning director. I think he, even on this one outing alone, would be entitled to be considered one of the best directors of the 1960s, but never gets the chance because he never does more than one episode. But there are so many different things I could have chosen, so I don't expect to get anywhere close. But let's see what Mark Aldridge has chosen. It's his favourite thing of episode 1 of the Ark.
So for episode 1, I knew right away what I was going to pick for my favourite thing in episode 1. And as is the case with probably most of the things that I've picked, it's a little bit of a cheat, because it's sort of one thing that stands for something else. And so for an episode 1, my favourite thing is the elephant. Absolutely love the fact that director Michael Imeson actually got a real elephant who could interact with the cast. In the second episode, we see a monoid feeding it, trying to make it better because it seems to have been struck by Dodo's careless cold. And I just think it's such a good example of the ambition of this story, that Michael Imeson is not going to take the easy way out with anything. He's going to say, right, what is the best way that I could do this? You could have done that with stock footage. And frankly, we wouldn't have batted an eyelid. We said, of course, it would be ridiculous to bring an elephant into the studio. But it's a better result, and that's what he went for. So for me, the elephant really stands for the ambition of Michael Imeson, of the fact that he was really, really obviously trying very hard. And I know from interviews that I've seen on the DVD and such like, that this was quite a tough assignment for him, and he clearly didn't get the credit that I think that he deserved. So the elephant is my favourite thing about episode 1.
Well, do you know what? I think I get the point for that, because the elephant is among the many things that Michael has brought to it, and Mark explained that he'd chosen the elephant as a conduit to, pour to redirect some credit Michael Imeson's way. So I think, it's up to you. If you're keeping score at home on your Happy Times and Places spreadsheet that none of you have, I think I get the credit for that, even though I didn't say, well, I love the elephant and that's why Michael Imeson is great. I think we were both alluding to the same things. And Monica the elephant she's actually the headline of the episode, really, isn't she? She was there for a lot of the photo shoots and was obviously big news. It paid off the effort. And as I say, I think Michael had to put her up out in a van outside his house overnight. I think having her in it did what was required for the episode, because, as you say, in Doctor Who, you're sort of used to seeing stock footage, and the fact that lizard and that bird are not, and you see them with the monoid, that's already, that's before we've even seen the elephant, is effective, because you're going, oh, we haven't, our visual grammar has been slightly played with here, because we're kind of used to the fact that we might see something like that in slightly blurrier film and then have a close-up of our friends, or then cut to the action where the dialogue or the specific action to this episode happens. And that's not just Doctor Who, but here you have the lizard and the bird that's chucked onto it, which I still think is funny, even though it's not very nice. But then you pan up to the monoid and you go, oh no, God, that was all organic. That was all part of one shot. And so that's the director immediately going, I'm gonna try and subvert your expectations. You know what you're used to watching television, so I'm going to make you think you're seeing something, bit of stock footage of a zoo. Oh no, we've made this zoo for you for this program because it's a special space zoo. And then you go, oh, okay, well, I'm being drawn into this particular world rather than being told a story in the way that I'm used to every story being told, whether it's a police procedural or a play for today or whatever. It's going, no, this is Doctor Who, we're in space, we do things differently here. And then Monica is the extension of that, in that she then comes in and you go, oh yeah, this is, we'll probably see this will be a bit of stock footage. Oh my God, look at that then, to coin a phrase, or look at him then. And interacting with the regulars, which is lovely, because anything I think that has our regulars sort of in the same shot as something, having William Hartnell in the same shot as an elephant, I think is brilliant. I think it just brings it all together, and it's that neat. Again, it's Doctor Who bringing two things together that are recognisable: your leading man, William Hartnell, and an elephant, but then putting them together, and that's when you get the magic. And I think it is a sign that Michael was really, really ambitious, and Peter Purves is wrong to be hard on him. But I know where Peter's coming from, because he wasn't wild about the Wiles era, and as I say, he's the story is that Michael was fired at the end of the run, so that would therefore lead to the idea that the arc's not very well produced and directed. I think that is incorrect. And yes. So there we are, and that's a bit of the received wisdom about the arc that I think is incorrect, even though I can see why it's been arrived at. And here's a fact. Yesterday I was teaching Peter Purves how to use GarageBand over Zoom, so I feel I can pick him up on his misapprehensions about the arc. And there's a sentence I never thought of. Well, because when I was younger, I didn't know GarageBand and Zoom didn't exist. But I suppose when I was younger, if I was teaching Peter Purves about GarageBand and with a Zoom, we would be eating a rocket-shaped ice lolly in an actual garage with a band. But it wasn't those things. It was the modern way of doing it. But anyway, what a delight to have arrived at that particular situation. I'm a very lucky boy. Who'd have thought, when I was watching it on a bootleg copy on a Yashima videotape that got chewed up, but still remained in decent shape. And I'm glad I don't have to watch that poor bird with a zigzaggedy line going down it that is a scar from the tape damage. But anyway, I think that is a terrific episode of Doctor Who. I'm looking forward to doing the rest of the arc. I know it does change, and I know things go south a little bit, but I think we've got lots of fascinating stuff to happen on the way. So I better go before the great flood engulfs us all. But thanks very much for listening, and I will speak to you next time. In the meantime, may all your times and places be happy. I'm just going to go and finish my Lego statue. It's of a man, just making a life-size Lego man. What could possibly go wrong? Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Mark Aldridge, who you can find on Blue Sky at markaldridge.info. He is the writer of a number of books about Agatha Christie, so if she is your bag, follow the scent and find him, because his work is second to none in that regard. I'm grateful to Mark and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Paul Kirkley, Andy Kitching, Chris Knight, Hendrik Korzeniowski, Pete Lack, Guy Lambert, Pete Lambert, Andy Larson, Erica Lear, Jonathan Letarge, Paul Lindblad, Neil Little, Mark Leadsom, Andrew Lester, Andrew Llewellyn, Jacob Lumley, Nate Lynch, Simon Liss, Man in a Skirt Alert, Philip Marsh, Joe McLachlan, Glenn McLeod, Steve Manfred, Nick Mellish, James Miller, Phil Mitchell, John Molyneux, Justin E. Monaghan, Jim Mooney, Brandon Moore, Ian Moore, Sheila Moore, and Jeremiah O'Connor. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Oh, I bet you'd love your name read out on the credits, wouldn't you? Well, you can get that for as little as £3 a month if you go to patreon.com/Toby Haydoke. One of the joys of being a patron is that you occasionally get your name on the credits, but you also get access to early releases, bonus material, lovely, pleasant, benign chat, and access to behind-the-scenes photos and footage, and sometimes interviews from the Blu-ray and DVD extras that I do, interviews from my archive, some never heard before, some lengthened ones of some that have been out before, sometimes bits of my comedy, all sorts of stuff. It's mostly Doctor Who, though, so don't let that put you off. But yes, that's at patreon.com/Toby Haydoke. You can also contribute by going to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydoke. That, unlike Patreon, doesn't give you access to goodies, but it also doesn't tie you up to a monthly commitment, and it's just a sort of one-off. It's just like sticking a quid in the hat of a busker as you go past. But you can do the support thing without having to put your hand in your pocket at all. There's no need for financial involvement if you just like and subscribe everywhere that this stuff is available. Any thumbs up is good, any 5-star reviews are good, and if you've got time to leave a few lines saying what you like about this stuff wherever you get it, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever, I would be very, very grateful, because that just helps to make it more noticeable to everybody else. And it's a jungle out there, but a very well rendered one. I'm also on all the social media. I'm on Instagram at toby.haydoke. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I'm also on Twitter /X at Toby Haydoke and at Haydoke Podcasts. And I'm on Blue Sky as well. I don't really understand how the Blue Sky monikers work. They seem very long and stuff, but just type in my name, you'll find me. So all of those things again just helps to give me the attention my father never did. And so there we have it. Well, I've got to paint a room this afternoon and listen to the cricket, but I thought I would I really enjoyed visiting the Ark. I don't know when I'd scheduled that originally, but I was in a sort of Hartnelly mood, and it's quite unlike many other stories. I feel a lot of season 1 has the same kind of feel about it, even though the stories are often tonally very different. I do see seasons 1, 2, and 3 in my head, sort of texturally, without any sort of conscious words or anything or thoughts. The 3 Hartnell seasons do have a sort of different texture, and of course, if you're in the mood for season 3, there's far less to choose from. It's funny how the Ark survived the purge, isn't it, when so much around it didn't? But I'm very glad it did, because I think it would be in an awful lot of trouble if we couldn't see it. It's already underrated. Anyway, hope you're having a lovely afternoon, or, well, it's not strictly speaking afternoon. I'm recording in the morning, but I hope you're having a lovely time wherever you are. But God save the Ark. Help to keep its reputation afloat, because I love it. Take care.